Toastmaster Keshav is the youngest member in our club. And I think he is going to be youngest member to complete his pathway. Oh. Yeah? Yeah. Therefore, this record will be special next time you announce it. President Rishabh, thank you very much. Let me briefly introduce also Toastmaster Keshav. Where I have written, I don't know. I have written only this thing, because this is such a remarkable thing. He has given me big, introduction, but achieving pathway in such a young age is really remarkable. One thing I want to tell about Toastmaster Keshav, he is really a diligent person, and he is going to join this year University of Columbia. Toastmaster Keshav. The speech title is Ping Pong to Pinnacle. Toastmaster Keshav, Ping Pong to Pinnacle. All the best to you.
Thank you. Toastmasters, guests, good evening.
Good evening.
How many of you have been in tune with the Olympics that just ended this Sunday? Show of hands. Okay, I see some sports fans. The best thing about watching sports events like the Olympics is you get to see professionals who've trained years of their lives just for that very moment. You get to experience the tension, the camaraderie, the competition, all in a matter of minutes. And that's the beauty of it. The first time I watched the Olympics was in 2012, and I watched one event, Usain Bolt running the 100-meter dash. It's phenomenal. It's a record that's still in the history books today. And I remember watching him do his iconic dash sign as he raced first and smoked the competition. It was also around the time that I was interested in competing in sports. And so I decided to pick up table tennis. Now, Emirates Toastmasters, you know me, I know you. We've gone about this discussion of me and my table tennis history. But I'd like to focus on one game. I've played thousands of them, but there's one that really sticks because it's one that I don't have any recollection of. It's the finals of my last year, and I'm representing my team at the UAE level. If I win, it's done. We win the championship. But I'm up against the captain, someone who I played the week before that and lost. So I was nervous. I was anxious. I could tell my hands were shaking as I was stepping onto the court. The game begins. And so we go back and forth immediately as we go point after point. It's 8-8. It's 9-8. It's 9-9. 10-9. 11-9. The game gets called in his favor. And I go back to my coaches thinking and coming up with strategies to go into the next set. The next set begins. 5-5, 7-5, 9-5, 11-5. I've lost again, but this time convincingly so. I realized I was way too distracted. And as I walked into the third set, I didn't have as much energy anymore. I played lethargically. I played as if I'd already lost the game. And my coaches, beep, called a timeout. I walk straight to my coaches. And I sit and I grab my towel. I grab a sip of water as I try and understand how to get back into the game. I haven't lost yet, but I'm almost there. I sit and think, and I realize I have been focusing at anything but the game. And something my coach told me at that very moment stuck. Eyes on the ball. It's the most important thing in table tennis. Yet in the heat of the moment, I sometimes forget it. I drink my water, calm myself down, and get back to the stage. What happens after this moment is what I mentioned was a complete blur to me. Because every story I've heard after this was only a narration, something that my teammates told me or my coaches told me. I wrapped up the third set and won, but I don't remember it. I get back into the fourth set, And my opponent calls a timeout because the momentum's in my favor. We go back again. But this time, instead of listening to my coaches, I'm in my own space. I don't recognize my surroundings. They're saying words, but it isn't registering. Walk back. I start the game again, and I've won the fourth set again. I go to my teammates. They reach their hands out for a high five, but then I don't notice it. I walk past them as if I'm ignoring the friends that I've trained with for 5 years. I come in the fifth set, and somehow I miraculously win. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been craving to understand what that experience for 2 years after that moment. Let's jump to 2021, where I come into university. COVID's over, and as Toastmaster Nachiket mentioned, it affected everybody. And I took my opportunity, once all of that was over, to get involved with every activity I could find. Take it academics, research, extracurriculars, Toastmasters, you name it, I was there. But I couldn't access that feeling that I experienced when I was in that moment. I couldn't get that sense of omnipotence, that sense of flowing with time itself, being one with the present. It was something I didn't understand, and I wanted to look into it further. The more I looked into it, the more I realized that this wasn't just something I experienced. It's something people did on a daily basis. The Olympians that I mentioned on this very day, if you watch the basketball games, if you watch the athletic 100-meter dash, you'll notice athletes be in their own zone. They'll be in this kind of state where they seem invincible to beat, like everything's in their favor. It isn't some miracle. They aren't just calling it from the sky or praying more harder than the other opponent. It's something that happens intentionally. And that's the focus of today's presentation. What I experienced that day is what in scientific literature is called flow. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes explaining that and help everyone understand the components of it. Now, there is a scientific definition here, but to me, flow was what happened that day. It was being fully present in that task. Flow was me completely focusing only on the ball and my opponent. Flow was accessing every resource I had to give more than 100% into this one activity. But the most important thing was flow was effortless. It didn't feel like I was consuming a lot of energy. Although after that, at the end of the game, I remember my legs shaking uncontrollably as I was completely depleted out of the energy. Once I started learning a bit more about flow, I asked myself this question. If flow was this wonder miracle drug that put me at such an improved state of being, why don't more people do it? Why don't more people figure out ways to access this flow state? But then I realized it wasn't that simple. You only see it on some of the most competitive and professional beings in their field for a reason. It's incredibly hard. And so I kind of developed this correlation that accessing flow state is associated with higher performance. But then the question still remains. What if you could access flow state at will? I kept digging and I kept researching. And so for the past 4 years, ever since the day I finished that tournament to the day I'm standing in front of you right now, I've spent 4 years researching, understanding, and experimenting this concept of flow, doing it with peers, doing it with myself, learning from psychology researchers to understand where this all comes about and whether I could go from that student athlete about 4 to 5 years ago to an executive athlete somewhere in the future, one who puts in 100% into their work, one who's focused but also is completely present and brings out not just quantity but also quality. And so, the more I understood it, I spent 4 years summarizing the 4 pillars of flow. These are the 4 pillars, and I'd like to use this as a reference to how you can access flow. Because flow is a state of mind, but tapping into flow is a skill. And we're at Toastmasters. we all understand that skills can be built and skills can be polished. And so accessing this flow state is no longer a serendipity. It's no longer something that happens on accident. It's something you can ingrain into your daily lives, and it's something that can improve the quality of your work as well. So there are 4 pillars to flow, and I'll go in detail. But let's go over it very quickly. First is the flow blockers. It's simple. If you want to focus, what's preventing you from doing that? Next, flow proneness. The same way you have a negative, there's always a positive. What helps you get into flow? Third, triggers. What exactly gets you back into that flow state? And fourth, the entire cycle. A system that lets you repeat this consistently. If the first 3 steps get you from 0 to 1, the 4th step gets you from 1 to 100. It's figuring out what are the requirements and then putting it all together to make it repeatable. So for the next part of this segment, I'd like to interact with all of you guys. I'm going to ask you some questions regarding each and every pillar of flow, and I'd like you to shout out answers with me. Okay? So first, for a flow blockers are kind of like, if here is me and there's flow state, this row would be a dam. It's like, it's blocking the flow it's blocking the connection between me and the flow state. And so we need to identify where the dam is and kind of understand how and when that opens up. So the first question for everybody is, what do you think prevents you from focusing on any given task at hand? Anybody? Yes? Mobile, okay.
Yeah. Your fears.
Your fears, great. Anything else?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. I'll associate that with negative emotions. That's okay?
Thinking about the consequences.
Consequences, okay. Anticipation, I think that's anxiety and all of those things. So we have some great answers here, and all of these are interconnected. So let's take this mischievous device right here, the phone, right? Everyone is associated with this phone. It's so ingrained with our daily habits that the first thing you do is snooze your alarm, go back, and once you get out of that snooze loop, you check your emails. It's literally the definition of a flow blocker. You get into it and you're distracted by different things that come up on your phone. It doesn't have to be an email. It can be a WhatsApp text. It can be some notification from an application that you forgot to download 6 months ago. Anything counts as a distraction, and it's a matter for you to, 1, identify them, and 2, work on them. So something that I figured out when I was doing university was, 1, completely ban and switch off all notifications. 2, give this to my parents, which is completely opposite from what students do today, but I realized it really helped me focus on the task at hand. If I didn't have access to it, I could work on what I actually needed to work on. So next, we talked about things that block flow. Emotions, actual objects and habits, but what helps you get into flow? For me, I'll give you an example before I lead into this question, right? So one thing I recognized in my 3rd year of university, as the course load got more often, was that I had to wake up before classes to get some work done. All I do is run to the washroom, brush my teeth, get back, and just sit on my laptop on one task for maybe an hour that I had decided the night before. Because I'm a very bad waking up guy. I can't wake up no matter how many alarms, no matter how many snoozes. I hate the mornings, right? So I knew if I gave myself even a second to think, I'd go back to the bed. And that wasn't good for my work. So I thought, okay, no one in my age group would wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, so I knock off any of the distractions that I would have in my daily life, which is great. But something I also learned a year later, coincidentally, was that the brain waves that usually occur during flow is very similar to the brain waves you have during sleep, which is very interesting because when I got out of bed and was back on the table within 3 to 4 minutes, my brain state was almost as similar, like just coming out of sleep. And so it was closest enough to getting into the flow state. And so within maybe 10 or 15 minutes, naturally I just wake up into my work and feeling very energized. It was very good to learn concepts. It's very similar to what our parents used to say back in the day, like study first thing in the morning. It's a very simple thing, and this saying comes from various experiences and anecdotes, but in reality, it is backed by science. So the question again, ladies and gentlemen, what helps you focus and get things done more often? Anybody?
Coffee.
Coffee, caffeine, that's great.
Music.
Music, awesome.
I mean, besides
Sorry?
Meditation.
Awesome.
Taking breaks.
Excellent. Like, I love this because we have diverse answers. One more.
yeah, besides coffee and music, setting timelines for ourselves.
Deadlines, time boxes. Excellent. So,
Building momentum.
building momentum. Okay. So, all of these things, as you see, are things that help the individual get into the mood. They feel a bit more relaxed. They slowly get rid of those negative emotions, something that you don't know how to handle, something that you're kind of not looking forward to. And so you really get past and get yourself more ready to focus on the task at hand. So next, flow triggers. And let's go straight into the question for this one because there's a lot of scientific things going on the back. So, do you have any rituals you do before starting something big? Anybody?
Praying to God daily before sleeping.
Okay, that's great.
Sit in silence for 2 minutes.
Sit in silence for 2 minutes, excellent.
5-second prayer.
5-second prayer, perfect. It's similar things, and these rituals go a long way. For example, Kobe Bryant, before every game, used to listen to this one single song so that his body would understand that after the song gets in, it's game time. And it's cause and effect, and setting up those things really help you get into flow. And so, scientifically, there's 3 triggers per se to get into flow with a higher chance. First, and I think it's self-explanatory, is clear goals. Clarity gates you focus. It's simple. I think if it's where the to-do list and like breaking down tasks come from. And I think having clear goals makes things it lets you focus a lot more faster. Second is immediate feedback. For example, when I was recording myself practicing this speech, I would do a segment of it. 2 minutes, pause the recording, and then go watch the recording. I'd understand, okay, I don't like this, but I like that. Keep the things you like and discard the things you don't, and work again. There's an immediate feedback loop because I'm recording myself doing this, right? There's different ways to get this. Feedback from coworkers, feedback from yourself, feedback from your environment, other stimuli. There's a lot of ways where you can get immediate feedback. And the third, and I'll explain this again on the next slide, is the challenge, skills, balance. So this is the more complex version. I'm going to take this and explain it, and then let's go to that. So if you could plot challenge and skills, let's take table tennis, for example. We went over my story. Because I was playing that captain who was around my skill level, the challenge was quite high because I lost to him the week before, but my skills were also very high because I have been playing for the past 5 years. So challenge is high, skill is high. It gives me this kind of desire to pursue the victory. And so it got me into flow a lot more quicker. Now, what happens if I was playing someone who had played just for a year? The challenge wouldn't be as much. And so the challenge would be low, my skill would be here, high, I'd be bored. Because I'd finish up the game, it wouldn't be as challenging, not as fun, move on. But what happens if I was playing the Olympic champion of the Chinese national team? I'd lose instantly. Like even before losing, I'd mentally lose because I'm just way too anxious and not sleeping the night before because I'm playing the Chinese champion. Like it's impossible to beat them. So you go straight into anxiety. And that's the broad generalization. The message being, if you can find an adequate balance between the challenge level for yourself and the skill that you possess, you'll find that good balance where you'll fall right in between the Goldilocks zone for the flow state. And depending on which way you go about it, so if you have more skills and a little bit less of a challenge, you feel in control of your situation. And if, let's say, the challenge is high, you're kind of okay in skills, you might be worried, but it won't be impossible, right? So that's how it goes with the challenge and skills balance. But I mentioned there were 4 pillars, so we got to put this all together, right? So first are the 3 pillars, which I call the prerequisites. You got to understand them because otherwise it doesn't really work out. You can't really access flow state if you can't set up your task at hand. let's say the challenge is off or your skills are off, you're going to make sure that all of those things are in conjunction with each other. Then comes the struggle phase. Once we get on our laptops and get started with a task, we usually struggle for a little bit. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, because there's a transition phase between your previous task and your current task. It happens, this is natural. But most people don't get past that struggle phase. We still stay in that, we still get distracted, there's other things coming up on the way, and it really, really affects us. And so we don't get past phase one. But once you do, you get to the much better part of the flow cycle. And phase two is where it really kicks in, release. Once you get past the struggle and once you've settled into your task, your brain releases these feel-good neurochemicals. It's when, for example, all of you guys are professionals, so you'll experience this at some point, various points in your lives. You start a task, you're not in the mood for it, but all of a sudden you're caught up in your task. That's exactly this. It's not just a feeling that you have, it's also backed by your neurochemistry. And then once you get into that rhythm and once your body and mind are aligned to the same task, you go straight into flow. You feel like you're getting so much work done in the same time, but then in reality, you're just tapping a mind state that is already established. And the last thing, and arguably the most important, is recovery. Because most people don't realize that focusing for long periods of time takes a lot more energy than you realize. And the next big point is that relaxation and recovery are not the same thing. Relaxation could be just watching a Netflix show or being on your phone. You feel relaxed, like you're watching good content, you think you're enjoying something, but it's not the same. Recovery could be, for example, you mentioned meditation. Some people like spending time with their friends and family. You're enjoying social connections. Or maybe you like to take a cold shower. Some people enjoy exercise. Those things really help your body recover. And if you schedule them, for example, in a flow block and then a recovery block and a flow block and a recovery block, even just doing 2 or 3 of those flow blocks for 1 to 2 hours gets you so much more ahead in terms of your work. And that's what I realized. And so let's quickly recap all of this before we lose sight of what we've been going on so far. The 4 pillars of flow, as I mentioned. Flow blockers, things that stop you from getting there. Flow proneness, what aids you to get there. Flow triggers, what things you can take action upon to get you into the flow state. And the cycle is putting all of these things together in a system so that you can go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 100. All right, everyone, thank you so much. But the one thing I want to emphasize here is that peak performance isn't by chance. It's always intentional. You see this in the Olympics all the time. Athletes train 4 years to make a 0.005 difference, like you would have seen in this year's 100-meter dash. It happens, but it takes a lot of work to get there. And so you'll always see flow in some of the most proficient people in your fields because they're intentionally working hard to get there. So the message of this is not that flow is the greatest thing in the world. It's more that taking active efforts and putting the right intention to make your work better and more fruitful is the right way to go about this. And that's what I've learned over the past 5 years. Thank you so much, and over to you, Toastmaster of the Day.
Once again, a huge round of applause for Toastmaster Keshav. Thank you. I think timer will give